Thank you so much to folks who are joining this morning. I know it's Wednesday, it's the middle of the week, and you know, resume and essay writing might not be the most exciting topic, but it's an important one. So I'm really glad that you're all here. My name's Samantha Apgar, and I will go over a couple different topics today. We're going to start off with some introductions. I'm going to talk about some resume rules, and then we'll go over some best practices for college essays. And finally, it was requested that I also go over some quick tips for interviews. So we'll just spend a little bit of time on that at the end. I saw some folks already submitted questions in the chat through the Whova app, which is very cool. So I think we're going to address both the questions that were submitted kind of throughout the presentation, but if there's any more questions that pop up, please feel free to use the chat feature to ask them throughout, and I will try my very best to get to them. So starting off with introductions, you're probably wondering, who is this person who's talking to me about these topics? Like I said, my name is Samantha Apgar. I currently work at Temple University, where I'm the assistant director of their public policy program. We have a master's degree program, an undergraduate minor, and are in the process of developing several new certificate programs in topics like nonprofit management. But this is not always what I did. I was a music major in college. I have a BA in music. I'm a singer, so if there are any instrumentalists on the call, please don't hold it against me. I also have minors in musical theater and American studies. And in addition, I am a teaching artist for Project 440. So I work with their Youth Advocacy Council, which is a program for alums of other Project 440 programs who want to learn more and go deeper on topics about advocacy and nonprofit management and board service. So there is a chat feature in the app, and I'd love to know who's on the call. Please feel free in the chat to, introduce yourselves, to drop a message and let me know, your hometown, what instrument you play. I'd love to get a sense of who's on here. So please feel free to post those. So the first thing we're going to talk about is resumes. And I think the overarching message I want folks to take away from this about both resumes and essays is don't stress about these things. They are important. You don't want to overlook them or rush them. You want to make sure you spend time making sure both of these elements of your application are strong, but you also don't want to stress out about them. It's not something that should take over your life. You have a lot of things to worry about with auditions and stuff like that. So make sure you give them their due. Oh, and I'm seeing some messages in there. We have folks from Austin, Texas, Philly, Oregon. That is extremely cool. Very cool. And hi, Ken. So kind of to start off, we're going to talk about two elements of your resume. There's the formatting and then the content that should be inside of it. So formatting wise, the two things you want to remember are to keep it clean and keep it organized. You are going to see, if you go online and Google resume templates, you're going to see a lot of really crazy, complicated resume templates with graphics and all of these different design elements. And the temptation is going to be to use, these and use lots of wild fonts and things like that to make your resume stand out. But in reality, this is a quality over quantity situation. You really just want to make it clean. So keep it organized. The order and spacing of the resume should make visual sense. A college admissions counselor is going to be looking at hundreds of these, and you want to make sure that it's just readable and that they can kind of pick up key information at a glance. So make sure your contact info is at the top. Make sure you have an email address that's professional. When I was in high school, I think my first email address was like Rose Lavender 2000 or something like that. Make sure you have an email address that sounds professional, that should feature your first and last name, be very clear. Make sure you have clearly marked sections. So you're going to kind of organize your resume by section rather, and then within those sections chronologically, rather than doing 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade. So sections could include things like education, awards, extracurricular activities, performance experience, etc. Make sure that you have clear dates marked so folks know how long that you've been involved in each activity. And then I think a big one, and this is, I noticed this a lot with my Philly students, is watch out for abbreviations. Folks like to put things like Kappa and assume that everyone knows what that means. For the purposes of your resume, spell out the High School of the Creative and Performing Arts. And that holds true for, activities, youth orchestras. Make sure you put the full name of the youth orchestra, things like that. Just watch for using abbreviations because you want folks to know what you're talking about. So that's the organization piece. The keeping it clean piece is, I've used a crazy font there to kind of demonstrate how you really don't want to use crazy fonts. You want to stick with fonts that are clean and easy to read. You want to make sure that the text isn't too small and that the margins aren't too narrow. You want to make sure that the overall look of the resume is just very clean and readable. You want to make sure things are consistently spaced. And a tip is that using tables is a great way to do this. So that's kind of the formatting piece. Content-wise, you're probably wondering, what do you include? So there's lots of different, like I said, you're going to want to organize by sections. So you'll want to include your musical activities. You want to make it very clear what your primary instrument is, highlight competitions and awards, indicate ensembles you performed in, along with chair placements if that's applicable. If you've done a lot of summer festivals, that could be its own section. You also want to include some non-musical activities. It helps show how you are a well-rounded candidate. This is a great opportunity to include extracurriculars, like any leadership experience you've had or volunteer activities, any employment you had, and then also special skills is often a section that you'll have. You do want to have an education system or an education section where you list your high school and your anticipated graduation date, but you typically won't include any activities from middle or elementary school unless it's a very substantive and ongoing commitment. So the example I'll often hear people give are, if you've been a Girl Scout since you were 5 and you've gone through it all the way up to your gold award in high school, that's something that you could include on your resume. But, typically college admissions counselors aren't going to care if you won a spelling bee in 4th grade or something like that. So that's not content you typically include. And then, kind of the last piece of the content that's important to remember is you're going to look at these things so many times. You will get to the point where you just won't catch your own typos anymore. So make sure you proofread it multiple times, but then if you can, have other people look at it. And you'll hear this come up again with resumes as well. The more pairs of eyes you can have on a document like this to give feedback, to make sure it's clear, to catch any typos, the better off you'll be. So we've talked about this, but in a lot of ways, it's a little bit easier to look at examples. So I have bit.ly links here. I've attached these as PDFs in the Whova app, and I'm also going to pull them up and screen share, but I created an example of kind of a bad resume with some issues, and my thought was it'd be fun to go through that, and I'd love for folks to drop in the chat some of the issues that they notice with it. And then we will look at a good resume and talk about why it works for a little bit. So here we have a bad resume sample. I would love for folks to take a minute, and if there's anything that stands out to you as problems with this resume, go ahead and drop it in the chat. Anyone see any issues with this? Yeah, Casey says it doesn't look professional. So, Kappa is abbreviated. Anna says that's another great one. Yeah, too many abbreviations. So I think you're all catching on. I love lobsters, but probably not the best font to use. Thank you, Andy. That's a great point. Yeah, so includes middle school info. All right, you've all been listening. So I'm going to kind of take it from the top going down, but you've already hit on a lot of the main points. You really don't need to use crazy font colors or crazy fonts to make it stand out. Like I said, the most important thing is that it's clean and readable. So this is, inconsistent font use, which is not great. You don't need to include things from elementary school. If you have, if you're graduating from high school, they'll assume that you graduated from elementary school. You don't need to list that. We talked about abbreviations. Really watch that, because throughout things like PMAY is the Philadelphia Music Alliance for Youth, and everyone in Philadelphia will know that. But sorry, I just got a text that there's a bit of an echo. My phone audio is off, so if there's anything else I need to change, folks on the tech side of it, please feel free to give me a text. Otherwise, I'm gonna keep going through the resume. The placement of contact info is sort of off. So you can see the contact info is weirdly on the right, and that's not where you'd expect to see it. The email address, yes, that's a really great point, Ken. This is what I'd said, making sure you have a professional email address. I use Riverdale as an example because that is a show I watch, and I'm given to understand a lot of you youths out there are fans of also. But when you're in a professional environment, like I said, you probably want to go create an email address that has your first and last name in it. You don't want something like I Heart Riverdale that could be for personal use, but in professional environments, you don't want that. Moving down, we can see the activities are organized by grade, and as someone pointed out earlier, includes things from middle school, which are, like I said, unless it's a substantive ongoing commitment that carries through to high school, probably doesn't need to be included. In addition, there's not really clear descriptions as to what a lot of this is. So for example, Generation Music. Someone who's really embedded in the Philadelphia music community might know what that is, but somebody outside of Philly might not be familiar with the organization. In addition, there's typos. Attendance is misspelled, and this is why you want to proofread. It's really easy to miss stuff like this. You want to have other people read it as well. Another typo down here. So anything else that folks want to point out that's not working with this resume? So Mika had a great question. I hope I said that right. Should activities be in chronological order by calendar year, not grouped into school years? So activities should really be in chronological order by section. And you'll see a little bit more what I mean by that when we look at the good resume sample. Any other last questions about this? Okay, great. So we're gonna move on to the good resume sample. What are some things that people immediately notice about this that's different from the other one? And again, feel free to drop it in the chat. Yeah, Casey, you see right away what the primary instrument is. Clear contact info and professional font, Anna says. Absolutely. A lot more fleshed out sections, and it's neatly and concisely organized. Absolutely. So let's kind of go from top to bottom again. As folks have pointed out, you'll see immediately, what instrument this person plays. Their contact info is very clear, and they have a professional email address. Things are organized by section. So you have education, awards, performance experience, summer festivals, extracurricular activities, employment, and special skills. So within each of these sections, things are organized chronologically. So you can see it indicates the years of the awards or the years that you've participated in the particular activity. And it just has a lot more information. There's a lot of detail here that lets folks know who you studied with, what chair you were, what ensembles you played with. It's really clear and easy to read. You'll notice the spacing of where things are aligned is very clear. There's descriptions. So for things like extracurricular activities, there's a little bit of detail about what you actually did. For example, if you are applying to be a music ed major, it's really important to know that you've had experience coaching people and, in music education environments. It has a special skills section, which is kind of an opportunity to highlight other things that you know how to do, particularly if you're applying to like arts administration or, music business programs. It can be really important to know that you have skills in things like graphic design, photography, event planning, things like that. So I mentioned earlier that a great trick for getting clear alignment and just making sure everything is really readable in a resume like this is using tables. So I wanted to point out that all of these are basically done as a table. And this is a Google Word doc, so anyone can access and create something like this for free. And what you do is you just go and you drop in a table. So and it will let you select how many cells you want to have. And that lets you fill in all the information, and it just automatically will line up everything really nicely. And then when you're done, you can just remove the table and you get this really easy to read chart-like thing. Amy asks, where is the information about the students' private teachers, years studied, other instruments played, years studied, etc.? So that's a great question. In regards to private teachers, that's something that you can choose to include or not include depending on whether or not you think it's appropriate. For example, in this sample resume, I've included information about clarinet teachers. This is a pretend clarinet player if you didn't pick up on that already. I've included information about clarinet teachers for summer festivals. That's something that you could include, if you, for example, were a Philadelphia Orchestra Fellow, and so you had an opportunity to study with someone from the orchestra. That's something that you could include in, a performance experience section or something like that. You could also create just build that into the education section as well if you wanted to expand on it that way. Another example is in the awards section, I included as an example being a PMAY artist, a Philadelphia Music Alliance for Youth Artists. So if you were to study with specific instructors under that, you could just go in and add a bullet point under there with the instructor and the years that you studied with them. If you play multiple instruments, which is the other piece Amy asked about, that would be another great thing to add in your special skills section and highlight there. You're probably going to be auditioning and applying to have one instrument be your primary instrument. So that's what you want to highlight for the bulk of the resume. But certainly having skills in other instrument areas would be great. So you could just add a bullet point that says piano, intermediate, or I'm trying to think what else, clarinet, I guess flute intermediate, or things like that. So I think that answers that question a little bit. A lot of, like I said, resumes are really quality over quantity. You want to keep it down to one page. And just one little piece of advice I want to give is sometimes when folks go to start putting these together, they will feel a little panicky and feel like they haven't done enough. This is like a sample resume of, it would be virtually impossible for a high school student to actually do all of these activities in 4 years. This is just to give you all a lot of content to view and work with. So as you go to start putting your own resumes together, don't stress. Don't try to create experiences that you don't have. Just be honest about what you've done. Make sure that you highlight the experiences you have had, and know that that's enough. uh, don't get stressed and feeling like you haven't done enough with your high school time. So both of these, if you want to go and view them after, like I said, they are linked in the Whova app, and they are also linked in the I have bit.ly links here in my presentation so that you can access them really easily. So that's a little bit about resume writing. I'm seeing there's another Q&A question. Yes, and it's another similar question to Amy's, where wouldn't a student add their lessons, teachers, how many years studied? Yes, you can absolutely add that under the education section is where I'd probably put that. And you can highlight different teachers and years studied for a specific instrument. Particularly if your teacher has an affiliation with the school, is a name that the school would recognize. In the sample resume I was using, you saw I included instructors for the summer programs. And like I mentioned, if you've done a specific fellowship where you've studied with someone, that particularly someone that's a known entity that someone at the university might recognize, that's a great place to highlight that. And you can just add those sub bullet points under the particular instrument, festival, fellowship, whatever that is. All right, so moving right along, we're going to talk a little bit about essays now. And this is another thing I feel like folks get very stressed about. I think some key things to remember are you really just want to be authentic. It's very similar to the resume in that, it's really about quality over quantity. And love it or hate it, writing is a really important skill that you're going to use for the rest of your life, whether it's writing professional emails to correspond with people or actually writing as part of your job. So the most important thing to remember is to write in your own voice. Being generic won't help your chances. One of the questions we got in advance of the session was about cliches, and really avoid cliches, be honest, be specific about the details of your own experiences, and make sure you're actually responding to the prompt are kind of the key overarching things there. You want to explain why you're different, and like I said, be authentic about it, but you also want to make sure you're answering the question that's asked. So if the prompt is, tell us about the time you've overcome a challenge, you probably don't want to, go off on a tangent describing your perfect day or something like that. You want to make sure you're focused on what the prompt actually asks, and don't go over the word count. A lot of times you'll be entering these essays into online application portals that will cut you off at a certain word count. So if there's a word limit listed, make sure you're mindful of that. So those are some broader themes. Let's go through this list of some specific do's, and then we're going to talk through some specific don'ts. So like I said, do be specific. You want to avoid things that are generic, that are cliches, that are predictable. Admissions officers are going to be looking at a ton of these essays, so you want to really be authentic. And the best way to do that really is using details. So, accurately describe something. What's going to help you avoid cliches is if you are talking about, not just what it means to be a high school student broadly, but you're talking about what it means to be a high school musician in Philadelphia going through this very specific experience. So make sure you really ground your essay in your lived experience and details. Do write about what interests you. The admissions officers want to know what you're interested in. Don't make the mistake. A lot of people will try to approach the essay by writing what they think admissions officers want to read. And they can, like I said, they read hundreds of these. They can detect an inauthentic essay from a mile away. So, focus on what interests you and what you want to write. Don't try and write an essay for an admissions officer, if that makes sense. Do prove your points. So use concrete examples from your life experience to support your theme. Don't say, this was the biggest challenge that I ever had to overcome, and then not give examples of why or go into detail about why. Make sure that there's structure where you're working to prove your point. You do want to proofread for grammar. So like I said, this proofreading piece keeps coming up. You're going to spend a lot of time on these things. It's going to get to the point where you can't even see the typos or errors. And the more times you can proofread it, the more folks you can have proofread it for you, the better off you're going to be. Do have a clear and concise conclusion. So the ending is really important. Make sure that you make clear what the theme is, that you tie together all of the different points and elements you brought up in the essay, and that you end on a strong note. You want to do that, both in music and with your writing. And a real good tip for this is reading your essay out loud. You'll catch a lot more when you do that. You'll notice when a sentence seems awkward, when the flow seems off, when ideas don't connect to one another. It's a lot easier to catch those when you read them out loud. So some don'ts. Don't use 20 words when 5 will do. I think sometimes when there's a word limit, folks will feel like they need to use exactly as many words as the word limit is. If it's 1,000 words, you're going to try to get to 999. And really what you want to do is make sure that you're responding to the prompt clearly and concisely. So don't feel like you need to take up space by adding unnecessary language to things. It's really, the next one is don't try to impress with vocabulary. It's really obvious when a high school student pulls out a thesaurus and is just trying to use big words to make a point that they can use big words. You want to have varied vocabulary, but you Ken chimed in the chat, write like Ernest Hemingway, not like Herman Melville. Like that, might steal that. You want to write in your voice. You want to sound, again, going back to that theme of authenticity, you want to sound like yourself, telling your story, talking about your experience. So yes, have varied sentence structure, have varied vocabulary, but don't feel like every word has to be something you've pulled from a thesaurus and sound like some super academic writing for an essay to be good. Don't rewrite your resume as an essay. In your application, you're submitting your resume, and then you're going to separately submit your essay. Respond to the prompt. Again, try not to go off on tangents, and don't feel like you need to work in every musical experience you've had into your essay. They have your resume. They're going to know what ensembles you've played with. They're going to know what summer festivals you've done. They're going to know who you've studied with. They're going to know that you graduated from you're slated to graduate from high school. Don't feel like you need to work in every one of those experiences in your essay. They're two separate things. Don't be a comedian. So gentle humor is okay, but if you are trying to force a laugh, if you're somebody who's normally very sarcastic, just watch that. Again, you want to be authentic to your tone, but you have to know that tone is really hard in writing sometimes. And, err on the side of a little bit more professional and formal. Clever is good. Cute and like precious and sarcastic is not. And then the last and most important thing is don't make things up. Every admissions office has tons of stories about applicants who have lied, who have exaggerated, or, just like plain fabricated things out of thin air. often in the hopes that the person who's reading it won't pay attention. And just like I said, admissions officers can smell from a mile away when somebody has just been pulling big words from a thesaurus. They can tell when something is off with an essay. So, this goes for your resume as well. Just don't do it. Don't make things up. Be authentic about, the experiences that you've had, the training that you've had to date, and know that, it might be tempting in the moment, but it's not worth it in the long run. It will catch up with you. And another tip I wanted to share is if you keep a journal, this can be a great resource for essay topic ideas. And if you don't keep a journal, and you're getting towards the college application cycle, maybe think about starting one. Again, you want to be responding to these essay prompts with stories about your lived experiences. And so that can be a great resource to go back and, as you're looking for language to describe what challenge you overcame, what triumph you're most proud of, whatever the prompt is, that can be a really useful tool. Great. So I'm just checking to see if there's any sort of lingering questions about essays. Some of the ones we got in advance of the session, like I mentioned, were about avoiding cliches, which we've talked about. The best way to avoid that is to really ground your essay in the details of your experience. And then the other question we got in advance was, do you have recommendations of good guidelines to follow when writing a college essay, specifically any topic ideas? And like I said, the topics are really going to be dictated by what the prompt is and what experience you've had that you think you can write about most compellingly. And again, just watch getting off on a tangent from whatever the prompt is. There might be something you really wish you could work in there, but if the essay prompt doesn't call for it, it doesn't call for it. Okay. Mika had a general question about the college admissions process, and she asked if you submit an application to the university itself before auditioning to their School of Music. I can't speak to every single application process, but yes, in my experience, typically the kind of order of operations is that you go through the application process first. You'll submit your application form and materials, which is usually when they'll require the resume and essay and all that. And then there might be a first round where you submit a recording or something like that. And then typically a little later is when you'll schedule an audition. So the last topic we wanted to touch on today, and this wasn't in the session title, but was something that was requested I speak about a little bit, is just some interview tips. Great, thank you, Amy, for chiming in about the pre-screen piece. So just some interview tips. The first is practice for your interview. So it's really important that you prepare for this. Again, you don't want to stress out about interviews, but you do want to give them their attention and due. There's common interview questions that you're going to get. So if you Google common college interview questions, you'll find lists and lists and lists. So there's lots of resources out there about this. So spend a little time on it. Just set aside an hour, Google a list of common college interview questions, and bullet point out how you would respond to them. Even if you don't end up using this or they don't end up asking those questions, you will feel calmer because you have fully prepared. And a great tip for this is, just like with your instrument, recording yourself is a great way to practice. Interviews are weird. Public speaking is weird. Playing an instrument in front of folks can feel weird. There might be habits that you have, tics that you have that you won't notice until you record yourself and watch back. So, have someone do a mock interview with you. If you can get a friend, a family member, and record yourself and practice it until you feel the easiness of the responses in your body. Just like you would, like I said, just like you would practice for an instrument. Come prepared. So bring specific questions. If you are interviewing with a college in Michigan, don't ask a question about, make sure that you've done your homework, make sure that you know who the instructors are there, make sure you know who you would potentially want to study with, make sure you know where the college is and what they have to offer, and that you've tailored questions to that specific university, because that really shows folks that you're interested and committed to coming there. So, like I said, if you are interviewing at a college in Michigan, make sure that you are asking questions that are specific and pertinent to that place, and don't accidentally ask a question that's pertinent to a college in California. It's a great way to show that you are a detail-oriented person and that you really care about that particular college or university. Be your best self. So I've used the word authentic a lot in this presentation, but at the end of the day, that's really the way to approach this, whether it's your resume, your essay, or an interview. You want to be your best self. You're not trying to be someone else. You're not trying to, exaggerate to make it seem like you have experience you don't have. You just need to be the best version of yourself. So, make sure you get a good night's sleep the night before your interview. Make sure you eat breakfast the morning of your interview. Make sure that you have an outfit picked out that makes you feel confident and good. Make sure that you are being professional and mature. And again, folks will see and feel when you are being authentic, and folks will see and feel like when you are trying to be someone that you are not. And then the last piece of advice that is good for interviews and life in general is thank people. Writing a thank you note or email can feel very old fashioned. I know I hated doing it when I was in high school, but honestly, it makes such a world of difference. This is good for interviews. This is good if there's anyone along the way you speak with, for an informational interview as you're trying to decide career paths or college paths. Just no one's ever going to be mad that you thanked them. And a quick email, or, if you're feeling particularly ambitious and it's appropriate, a handwritten note will go a really long way. So that is what I have to go over. It looks like we have a little more than 10 minutes left, but I'm going to just close with one of my favorite quotes that I think underlines a lot of what I've talked about today. And it's from Benjamin Franklin, one of Philadelphia's favorites. And it's, "If you fail to plan, you are planning to fail." So I think the key thing, I started out saying you don't want your essay and your resume to be the things that are stressing you out. You have your audition and so much else to worry about, but you do want to give them the time and attention that they deserve. They are, if you are competing with someone who has the same GPA, who, is at a really similar place in their musical journey as you, it can be having a really professional, polished presentation of, your experience, being able to really clearly articulate and respond to an essay prompt. That those can be the things that put you over the edge. So make sure that you take the time to polish these things and put your best foot forward. If there's any other questions, I thought we'd leave a little time for Q&A. So please feel free to drop them in the Q&A section of the app or in the chat. And if not, thank you so much. I'm absolutely delighted that, we have folks from so many different places attending the college fair this year. It's really cool to see how it translates to a virtual context. And I appreciate your time and attention.